as his faithful followers and in keeping with Capuchin tradition, we value the grace of working. Each day we accept its toil responsibly and gladly as a way of praising God and serving his people. We commit ourselves to work diligently as true lesser ones, sharing the lot of those who must work for their living. From Chapter 5 of our Capuchin Constitutions. So what do you do? This is the rite of passage of becoming a Washingtonian, the ability to say that question with ease. It's the first question anybody asks anyone in the DC area. What do you do? And so my first year here, when I was working with the young adult community, I decided I would not ask that question. Well, it just so happens I was talking to this young lady once, and I said, instead of what do you do, I asked, so who are you? Crickets. Followed by an existential crisis. Brothers, today the whole notion of work seems so inextricably bound up with our identity, right? I am a lawyer. I am a teacher. I am in public health and whatnot. But is that our identity really? Right? I mean, one need only read a few pages of Bonaventure or Augustine or Genesis to realize that at the heart of my human identity lies the presence of another. And not just any other, but the divine other. Right? God is closer to me than I am to my own self. And so to grow into our identity, an identity that is not self-fabricated by work, but rather received as a gift, means growing into who we are objectively, as images of God. Man is not, writes Joseph Ratzinger, the architect of his own life. Francis of Assisi, the Lord told me what to do. And so from this perspective, I think we can appreciate work as a kind of exercise, an exercise whereby we cultivate the very depths of our own life. It's kind of an existential unfolding of ourselves. When God called Adam and Eve to work and then to rest, he revealed the inner meaning of work. Right? It's not mere activity, but rather touches upon the depths of who we are as images of one who creates. It is our response to God's creative gift, and it's ultimately bound up with the Sabbath, and so with worship. Our constitutions put it well when they say that work is a means to grow in holiness. The chapter in our constitutions really has some beautiful reflections on work, and I think it's so important for us to reflect on work, given how busy we are here, right? We have our ministry, we have school, we have schoolwork, we have dishes, we have house jobs, we have fraternal service, and so forth. And I think it's so easy that in the midst of all of this, we can fall into two camps where we grow apathetic toward work at one side, or on the other, we view work in terms of self-profit. But I want to kind of show four aspects, four details, four pieces of catechesis that our constitutions teach us about work, which I think can help us to appreciate it and not fall into apathy or self-profit. One, work is relational. Our constitutions teach work is the fundamental means by which we support ourselves and exercise charity. Do we see this profoundly relational dimension of work? Do we see work as a fraternal activity that exercises charity? Do we approach work, all of our work, through this lens? Two, work cultivates God's gifts. Therefore, our constitutions say, let each of us make his God-given talents bear fruit. It seems that a new trend in some of our house reflections is to reference our holy treasurer, Bill Gillum. So I would like to reference him now. He's in the garden a lot, right? He waters it, he fertilizes, he plants, he replants, he trims, etc. he asks Ray to do it all over again. The point I want to emphasize is that to bear fruit, which our garden certainly does, it's beautiful. To bear fruit, it takes time, right? Effort, attention. And so I ask us this: do we take our call to bear fruit that seriously? How critically do we attend to the seeds God has planted in us? Attend to it in such a way so as to nurture it and cultivate it. The two camps that I mentioned above, where you can fall into kind of an apathetic view of work or just see work in terms of self-profit, is shown in our constitutions. They speak of excessive activity or laziness. Right? And both of these clearly do not edify us. One makes us zombies, and the other exhausts us of our life forces. But I think when we approach work as a means of cultivating God's gift, we really begin to appreciate it in a beautiful light. Right? We see that work is a means of cultivating that which God has given us. And perhaps you object. I'm just not good at X or Y. God hasn't gifted me with that. And surely, none of us are gifted in every area of life that we find ourselves in, but perhaps we can be creative. And we can ask ourselves, okay, God has not gifted me in this area, but for whatever reason I am called to do this. So what kind of fruit does God want me to cultivate now? 3, work is about love of God and love of neighbor. And the quote that I began this reflection with, we are told to accept the toil of our work responsibly as a way of praising God and serving His people. And so our Constitution places work in that beautiful twofold love of God and love of neighbor. So I ask again, do we see our work in this life? It seems to me that especially as student friars, we might feel bogged down by our studies. How is this helping me live the gospel life? Spending hours reading and highlighting and so forth. But remember that when St. Francis gives Anthony permission to teach, he places teaching theology within the confines of work. And so our work, my brothers, is ultimately about loving God and loving neighbor. And if it's not, then we're not being Capuchin in our studies. And if you object, right, then let's remember also that our church is not just a house of St. Felice of Cantalice and St. Teresa of Calcutta, but also St. Bernard, right, St. Augustine, Bonaventure, Aquinas, and so forth. If we take our Capuchin life seriously, then we have to take our studies seriously. 4, work is Eucharistic. Let us, therefore, our Constitution say, lovingly direct all our intentions and all our energies to God. And in the celebration of the Eucharist, as we unite ourselves to the sacrifice of Christ, offer to the Father the toil and the fruits of our daily work. In tune with St. Francis, then, that nothing should extinguish within us the spirit of prayer and devotion, our constitutions, with these words I just quoted, ask us to see our life as a holistic whole. And so when we come to the chapel, we don't really leave our books in our room or in the library. We don't leave the parish down the street. We don't leave the poor outside. When we come to the chapel, we bring all of that with us. Authentic work demands of us a deeply reflective spirit, one in which we can safeguard our work outside so that we can bring it to our prayer inside. The library becomes sacred. The corner of Florida and North Capitol where we go on Sunday, sacred. The dishes, sacred. Why? Because it finds its rest upon the altar of the living God. In closing, I want to leave you with a beautiful passage from St. Bonaventure that we find at the end of his mystical vine. Our holy doctor puts these words on the words of Christ. I have given myself to you. Give yourself to me. Himself to us without reserve. He asks us to give ourselves to him. That's the only possible culmination or fulfillment of our human life. Work is not work if it gets in the way of that journey. Work is only work when it contributes to it. I have given myself to you. Give yourself to me. May the Lord, through the intercession of his holy archangels, grant us the grace to give ourselves to him at all times, not just here in the chapel, but in the work of our hands as well.